Hi, my name is Craig from Secret Squirrel, Utah Concealed Carry, gun cleaning, and gun coaching. Here on this channel, we go over everything concealed carry to make you a better concealed carrier. Everything from gun products, gun reviews, tactics, law, and more. On October 2nd, we experienced a tragedy, our most recent active shooter situation. In response to this situation as it's being investigated, I hope to be able to give you some education on what to do when confronted with a mass shooter. First up, there's a lot of confusion on what makes a person an active shooter versus a dealer of domestic terrorism. So let's use a couple of official definitions to be able to know the difference between an active shooter and a domestic terrorist. The Department of Homeland Security defines an active shooter as a person who is actively engaging a large group of people without a specific intent, but shooting individuals as targets of opportunity, usually choosing a highly populated area, usually a soft target. Things in the United States, soft targets are things like schools or gun-free zones. Again, the point that the Department of Homeland Security makes is that there is no direct pattern, correlation, or motive to these shooters' actions. A good example of a person who's an active shooter is the shooter that committed the Sandy Hook Elementary. So what about a domestic terrorist? According to United States federal law, under the Patriot Act, a person who is a domestic terrorist is a person that commits any act of violence or coercion. A domestic terrorist is a person that commits acts of violence against human beings that has a direct motive or intent. It could be to influence a government policy or law, or it could be to affect the conduct of the government itself through these acts of violence. A good example of a domestic terrorist is Timothy McVeigh when he conducted the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. So irregardless of the definition, if confronted with a shooter on a mass scale, what should you do? Each situation is going to be completely different. However, there is a formula that you can follow that will be the same every time to keep you and others safe. That formula is run, hide, then fight. This should be the model that you follow in every single shooter situation that you encounter. Let me show you a good example of this model in action. Here in Utah, we had a mass shooter of our own in the Trolley Square shooting. The Trolley Square shooting was a large public shopping area in downtown Salt Lake City. This occurred in 2007 when a shooter walked into the shopping area from the parking garage with a backpack full of guns. Using a shotgun as his primary weapon of choice, he walked through the parking garage and into the shopping center, shooting people indiscriminately as he walked. In the shopping center was off-duty police officer Kenneth Hammond. He was there with his pregnant wife shopping, and when they heard the shots, they took refuge in a store. In response to this shooter, and knowing that he wasn't going to leave, Officer Hammond presented himself to the shooter as a police officer. He then drew his firearm and provided suppressing fire against the shooter to protect people in his close proximity. In response to Officer Hammond, the shooter moved on and continued to shoot at other people instead of advancing in Officer Hammond's direction. At this time, Officer Hammond, having called 911 and was speaking with police dispatch, received notification that another Salt Lake City police officer was there on site. This other police officer joined up with Officer Hammond and moved and advanced towards the shooter. Officer Hammond and this other Salt Lake City police officer advanced on the shooter, and in doing so, they were notified by dispatch that there was going to be a SWAT team that was going to enter the building as well. Between the SWAT team and Officer Hammond and the other Salt Lake City police officer, they were able to take care of the shooter and stop the threat. The shooting itself only lasted a total of 6 minutes. At the end of the shooting, 5 were dead and 4 were wounded. Since none of you are John Rambo, these are the steps that you and the others with you should take to protect your lives. The sound of small arms gunfire sounds like a popcorn popper. Once you have identified this small arms fire, go to step 1. Step 1 is to run. That's right, run. Distance is your friend. Get away from the shooter, get away from the threat. Do not hesitate. Start running and tell others around you to do so. Now, you may run into a situation where others will not come with you. In that case, you must make a personal decision to be able to protect your life and the lives of others or stay. Step number 2 is hide. That's right, you're not a coward from hiding from a shooter. And in this case, if you're boxed in and you have nowhere to go, hiding is step number 2 and the next best thing to do. While hiding, there's 2 things to think of: cover and concealment. There is a difference between the two. Cover is something that is thick enough, big enough, broad enough, or deep enough to stop bullets. Concealment is something that simply allows the shooter not to see you or others with you. A good example of this is, say, you hiding behind a wooden desk would be simply concealment. Hiding behind the engine block of a car or a cement pillar would be cover. Step 3 is fight. I know this is the step that most of you think of right away, especially as a concealed carrier. You're thinking, I have a gun. Fighting is my option right away. This is incorrect. In this moment, you were not able to run, you've hidden, but the shooter is still coming. Your only choice left is to fight. The good news is in this moment, if you were a concealed carrier and practicing and carried that day, you now have a distinct advantage. First thing you should do is, if you know the shooter is still coming and you're in a room, try and barricade the door. Arm everybody with you with whatever type of weapon they feel that they would be comfortable wielding against the shooter. While getting ready to fight, there's 2 tactics you can employ in this moment. Tactic number 1 is using what we call a fatal funnel. A fatal funnel is a hallway, doesn't matter how long, a hallway that does not have very many exits or side rooms so the shooter could hide or get any kind of cover or concealment in himself. The second tactic you could use that's very effective is a choke point. A choke point is something like a doorway or an arch, a small space that the shooter will have to come through. Lastly, the moment of truth. When the shooter arrives and he's made it through the barricaded door, if at all possible, at that time, stop the threat until you are no longer in danger. Now, the last consideration is you, as a concealed carrier, have a responsibility with everyone else in there to cooperate with law enforcement and first responders. The first part of that cooperation is not to go hunting for the shooter. As a police officer, we were trained in an active shooter situation to enter the building and to be able to work together as a unit or team. The first thing we should identify is the shooter and stop the threat immediately. If you, as a concealed carrier, are roaming the halls of an active shooter situation looking for that shooter, we now have a big problem. When the police arrive and encounter you, they will have to stop, considering you a threat, handcuff you, detain you, and possibly egress you from the situation, protect your life, losing vital manpower that they would need to put down the shooter. Remember, in this moment, everyone will be hyped up, scared, and on adrenaline. And everyone will react differently and in many times unpredictably. Keep that in mind as you're taking care of yourself and others around you. I hope you found this informative and helpful if you're ever going to be in a similar situation. Many federal and city websites have training just like this on them that you can review at a little bit more at your leisure. Thanks for watching us here at this video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. If you like the video itself, give it a thumbs up and a favorite. It'll help the channel grow and let us know what you like. If there's something else you'd like to see in the future, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below and we'll try and make a video to be able to help out. Thanks all of you for stopping by this video. I'm Craig from Secret Squirrel, and remember, protect your nuts.